Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do, all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. I'm Lady Liberty, and this is episode number 87. In this episode, we're going to discuss nature-based learning. Nature play is important for infants, toddlers, preschoolers, families, and communities. Nature-based education stimulates the diversity of children's play experience and contributes to their healthy development. In the past decade, the benefits of connecting to nature have been well documented in numerous scientific research studies and publications. In a paper published by North Carolina State University called Benefits of Connecting Children with Nature, Why Naturalize Outdoor Learning Environments, written by the Natural Learning Initiative, they cite a body of research that shows that children's social, psychological, academic, and physical health is positively impacted when they have daily contact with nature. Positive impacts of nature-based education include the following: supports multiple areas of development, including intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, and physical development. Nature-based learning supports creativity and problem solving, enhances cognitive abilities, improves academic performance, reduces attention deficit disorder symptoms, increases physical activity, improves nutrition, improves eyesight, improves social relations, and improves self-discipline, and finally reduces stress. With all these benefits, why hasn't nature-based education been integrated into all children's education programs across the planet? We've got a lot to talk about and an amazing panel to explore these issues with. But first, I'm going to read each of our panelists' bios, but I want to remind our audience that you can find more information about each of our participants on the show notes page located at consciousconsumernetwork.tv, and look for the show notes page for episode number 87. There you will find more information about each of our panelists on tonight's show, links to their projects and websites. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Claudine. Claudine's foray into the world of unschooling came as a natural response to watching her girls grow, now 6 and 3, and watching them learn. Noting the joy found in organic learning and natural rhythms, Claudine and her husband Keith delayed their daughter's traditional education in exchange for a gentle learning life process, only later learning terms like unschooling. With a family passion for outdoor play and exploration, a move to New York City to suburban New Jersey led Claudine to build a community network of unstructured outdoor play. Claudine joined forces with two of her trusted friends who were also like-minded mothers to form Forest School for All. Together, they help build and support communities for natural outdoor learning throughout the United States. Claudine enjoys slow traveling with her family, supporting local mothers as an LLL leader and building their local unschooling community. So welcome to tonight's panel, Claudine.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Next,
thank you very much for the introduction.
You're very welcome. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Rachel. Rachel created the Nature Preschool at Chippewa Nature Center in Midland, Michigan, one of the leading nature-based preschools in the U.S., and administered that program for 10 years. Her experiences inspired Rachel to author the handbook Establishing a Nature-Based Preschool, published by the National Association for Interpretation. In addition to doing private consulting in nature-based preschool field, she is a doctoral student in Michigan State's University Department and teacher of education. She currently co-chairs Natural Start Alliance's Council for Nature and Forest Preschools. So welcome, Rachel.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Dana. Dana is a 23-year-old graduate student at Keene University, scheduled to graduate with her Master of Arts in Speech Language Pathology in May of 2017. Before she graduates, she attended Towson University, where she earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Speech Language Pathology. Dana was a competitive swimmer starting at age 4 and swam until her sophomore year of college. With swimming as part of her life growing up, she spent a lot of time playing outside with her friends between class and meets. She was lucky to have a stay-at-home mom who encouraged Dana to spend more time outside and explore. Her childhood included much time playing in the mud and fishing with her dad. Outdoor activities have always been an integral part of her life. Thus, a true love of nature was nurtured. So welcome to tonight's panel, Dana.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here with you guys.
You're very, very welcome. And next, I'd like to introduce you to our final panelist, Carrie. Carrie is a homeschooling, unschooling mom of 2 children, 6 and 4. She credits her love of the outdoors to her childhood, growing up on the edge of Allegheny National Forest, where she played with the neighborhood children to build forts, pick blackberries, and swim in the creek to the local park. As a parent, she loves giving her children the yes zone of the outdoors, where they can explore and understand the world on their terms while testing their body's resiliency over the higher tree branches. Outside of co-learning in the Orange County, New York Forest School, Carrie also serves as the IT person for the Forest School for All movement, encouraging all families to get out and play in the woods. So welcome to tonight's panel, Carrie.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Why don't we start the conversation with you tonight, Carrie? Go ahead and share with us. We introduced you in your bio, but share with us a little bit about how nature-based learning really became a part of your life's work and a part of your passion and a part of how you integrate education for your children?
Well, it kind of grew as I grew as a mother. Claudine, who's also on the panel, would talk to me about the forest adventures that she would have. And I started to have forest envy. And I had a young child and we were figuring it out. And then I had 2 children and I was trying to figure out what kind of mother I wanted to be. And I kept hearing about forest school. And so when she finally started, talking about Forest School for All and we started turning that into something, I knew it was really something my family needed to have a part of. And it's great. I mean, having the kids out, I don't know how homeschooling mothers don't have kids out in nature because it gives you a break. But the things that they've grown to do and become independent and become competent with at 6 and 4 has just been really thrilling to watch.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like a lot of the benefits that I talked about in the bio, we'll be able to explore that a little bit deeper, but from everybody's bio so far, and I really want to get into the introductions, I really feel like nature-based education really should be a standard part of every kid's education. So I'm happy to hear from you, and I'm so happy you're part of tonight's panel, Carrie. So why don't we jump on over to Rachel next. Rachel, go ahead and share with us how nature-based education has become such an important part of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I love to hear you say that nature should be part of everyone's education, because I agree. And most of my recent work has been, how do we take nature to formal education? So I realize that's different from what some of you are doing. But that started primarily through preschool. So I was in environmental education, worked at nature centers, had sort of a career in nature center work. And worked at the Kalamazoo Nature Center for a year and a half or so, and they have a nature-based preschool. I was not working at the preschool, but I was, on staff. And actually their preschool was the 3rd nature-based preschool to start at a nature center, which we can talk about definitions later. That's a whole nother topic. But so anyway, then I moved to Chippewa Nature Center, which is also in Michigan, about 2.5 hours from Kalamazoo, and had been there a few years, and we were talking about this idea of a preschool, and there had been other nature centers were doing this with success. It's something we should pursue. So we decided to go for it, and we started a pilot year in 2007. All the years start to run together, but yeah, 2007, and quickly it became clear this was not going to be a pilot. We used an existing space, but the response from families was just incredible. So we ended up building a new building, outgrew that building, and now the program serves 140, I think there's 144 kids now. And as you said, I'm now pursuing my PhD. So as of July, I left Chippewa, and I'm working full-time on the PhD, but very much on this nature-based preschool idea, which is why I wrote the book, to try to help other people start programs, because people wanted to do it, but they didn't know where do I start, what do I do? So that's why I wrote the book, and then now I'm pursuing my PhD to try to do a little more research. You talked about research, which we can talk more about, the benefits of contact with nature, but we don't have a lot of research on the pedagogy, really, of nature pedagogy, as Claire Warden calls it, and the benefits of that specifically. So that's kind of one of the things I'm interested in pursuing.
Hi, Rachel. Everyone, I'm Dana. I'm going to jump in here because I am pretty passionate about preschool, so I'm excited to hear Rachel talk about it. I am I know I'm the only person on the panel who's not currently a mother or currently working in the preschool field yet, as They said, Lainey said I'm still a graduate student, but I have a personal story. When I was in preschool, I'd had formal education my whole life, but my mom tells the story all the time that she wanted us out on the playground, and there was some poison ivy or something everywhere, so they weren't letting us out. And as Lainey said, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she said demanded, she went to the Board of Education and said, those kids need to get back outside. You need to clean up that park. And the guy said, well, hey, don't you want your kid inside learning? And she said, my daughter knows that the grass is green. She knows the color green because grass is green. And she knows the color blue because the sky is blue. So get them outside. So they cleaned up the park and we got to go outside. But that kind of tells you where I came from. And I also love the concept of play-based learning. I am in the speech pathology field. I currently am doing an internship at a preschool, and my children with autism greatly benefit from play-based learning. And as we'll see later in a video, we want to learn about things that we're interested in, and that's what I find is so important with these kids, especially kids with autism, is they don't understand why they have to learn some of the things that we try to force on them. We just want them to do the formal education, but really when we go with what they want, it's much more beneficial is what I found through my experience. But other than that, I have benefited from being outside. I feel like my immune system is much stronger, I'll tell you that much, but other than that, that's all I have to introduce myself with at this point.
Well, I have to say that I'm just so thrilled that you're a part of tonight's panel because you're bringing a different perspective, and I love that you're here and you have these personal stories to share. The other thing that you bring up is working with kids with special needs, and that's a topic that I want to explore a little bit later in the program. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, let's jump on over to Claudine. Claudine, go ahead. I mean, I shared a little bit in your bio already of, your connection to nature-based education, but you took it to, at a very different organizational level. And I'd love to hear how nature-based education really, how it inspired you and how it became a part of your life.
Thanks. Yes, I'm very excited to be here and be able to share kind of how this journey has happened. Growing up myself, I spent most of my time outside. I just remember always being outside in the woods, playing and exploring. And we were living in New York City, and we were doing some classes with my daughters at the time. They were 3 and 6 months. But when we took a class that was outside and in the park, and it was all weather, and we were out in the rain, we were out in the snow, I just instantly noticed a difference at that time in my oldest on how she interacted in the class with the teachers, with the other students, and it was just a very different experience for her to really explore more, and she was doing more learning there than when she was in a more structured environment and indoors. And so that's what kind of created this passion for me being a mother, is I really saw an instant change in my daughter in the environment where she would actually interact more with what we were doing and her interests. So when we moved out of the city, and I was kind of just really looking for people to make friends, because we only knew 1 or 2 people, and we wanted to kind of find our community. And so I just kind of said, hey, does anyone want to play in the woods once a week? And apparently a lot of people do. So, our first day I had 30 children show up. So many families showed to play in the rain with us. And that's when I realized that if I could have that large of a group show up in the rain, I was like, wow. And we continued to play every single week, meeting new people, having people come consistently, and meeting through the winter. It was the most amazing winter, I think, so far, just experiencing the snow and how the outdoor environment changes, and watching how their interests kind of bring them from environments that they're familiar with, and how they then dive deeper into their learning because they're uncomfortable in that environment. And then just from there, more and more parents wanted to be outdoors and needed to figure out how to do that and how to create a group in an environment, because it's just more fun with friends. So that's when I came up with the idea of kind of sharing my experience and what I found, what worked and what didn't work, and what made it more efficient. We want to be outside in the forest more than we want to be on technology. So we really, that's what I kind of joined with my friends and said, hey, can we make this simple? Can we make this easy? Can we help other families get outdoors? Can we share the research? Can we share the information so that, we're not recreating the wheel every time someone wants to go outdoors? And that's kind of what our mission is, and my passion is to really help families see that you can just go outdoors, enjoy your time together, and you will learn. It's not just the children that learn. Us as parents and as adults, we learn things too. And I absolutely love learning alongside my children when we're in that environment. And I'm telling you, the oxygen in the forest is fabulous. It's always cooler in the summer in the forest. It's always warmer in the winter in the forest. And it's just one of the things that I really look forward to in our weeks that we do. So I'm very excited to be here and share our experiences and learn from each other and talk about this topic more, because I think it's really important. And I really hope that we can collaboratively help more families and help more children be outdoors, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, so many of the benefits.
Yeah, wonderful. What's interesting, both Claudine and Dina bring up play as part of the learning process. But yet, Rachel, you brought up something called nature-based education pedagogy, or nature pedagogy. And so I'm wondering if there is a standard, and I hate standardization definitions of anything, but just so we know that we're talking about the same thing, is there a standard definition for nature-based education? In other words, what is it?
Oh, the $1 million question. So there's lots of different definitions out there, but generally when people say nature-based or forest kindergarten or forest school, usually what they mean is lots of time outside. So immersion either the entire day. So this is where things start to switch a little bit. So nature-based preschools tend to talk about like 30 to 70% of the day outside, where forest kindergartens, forest preschools talk about it as 70 to 100%. So the phrase forest school sometimes is also misleading, because in the UK, forest school is an actual certification where schools, formal schools, go and visit a natural space, and on some sort of regular basis. That might be once a week, that might be once a month. So anyway, so all of those terms have different, depending on where you are in the world and what that particular meaning is, but generally it means extensive time outside, no matter the weather. So whether it's raining or snowing, as long as it's not thunderstorms and there aren't real danger of being outside, there's outdoor time, and that nature is the driving force of the curriculum, so that what the children are engaged in and what happens from the curriculum is emerging from their interest, but because they're outside, their interests are the natural world and seasonal, right? So that's what's there, that's what they're excited about. Oh, it's springtime and it just rained. I'm now interested in worms because they're everywhere, right? So those are probably the core definitions. When it gets into, so then separating like nature-based preschools versus forest preschools or nature preschool, So here's the other thing. Okay, I'm going to throw this out there, confuse you. So I mentioned Claire Warden. She talks about nature pedagogy, all the same kind of thing, but she uses that phrase nature instead of forest to remind everyone that it doesn't have to just be woods, right? That you could be in the desert or, some prairie space so that the ecosystem isn't limited just to forest. So you have that confusion sometimes. And then nature-based preschool folks also have this indoor space. So we talk about 3 spaces: the inside, the indoors, inside space, the outdoors in a play area, and then the beyond, outside the play space. So that's another element that distinguishes nature-based preschools from traditional ones. And then everyone has different, you know, how much they spend inside, like the forest preschools or forest kindergartens varies. So that's my perspective on that. I'd love to hear Claudine's take on forest school and why you chose that phrase and what the definition means to you.
Sure. It's my answer to that technically is when my daughters were 3 and 6 months, when we would go to this class, they called it forest school. And before I even knew there was a term called forest school. So the name actually came from my daughter before I was even privy to it existing out there in the rest of the world. You know, so that's kind of the reason why that happened. But yes, I am aware of a lot of the things you said, how there's just a lot of terminology out there, and it can kind of turn into like a word soup. But I think in the end, the goal is being outdoors and being in nature and learning in your natural environment. You know, in seeing groups that meet out in the desert, and groups that meet in warmer temperatures, or groups that meet in, you know, they're more north, or their winters are really cold right now, where they're dealing with, you know, 10 degrees, you know, earlier in the year than, you know, maybe in my area where we're kind of still hoping for snow. So I think it's more about being in that environment, in nature, and sparking that interest and talking about, you know, giving them that freedom. One of the things that I really have seen is that open space. So maybe it's not a forest, maybe it's a field, but maybe you're just outdoors where there aren't 4 walls. That's kind of keeping you in that space, which it's just a different experience. There's also a lot, there's a rock for everybody. There's a stick for everybody. There's trees around. There are, so it's just a very different environment where, you know, the freedom to move. You know, one of my favorite places is that, 2 spots that I really enjoy, and one of them is a very large open field, and it gave my children the opportunity to explore further away from me so that we didn't have to be kind of as close. It gave them that security to explore on their own and to take that independence to that next stage that they were ready for, but still be able to turn back and see mom is still here. And that's just one of the environments that I saw change in how they were able to explore that aspect of their independence.
So I've heard a little bit about free learning, and I've also heard a little bit about curriculum mentioned. And so I'm wondering if we can kind of define what that is. I mean, we are talking preschool age and kindergarten age, you know, early education. So obviously, you know, we're not talking about deep academics in terms of curriculum, but are we indeed talking about something that is predetermined or predefined? And as we talk about pedagogy, is there an actual means of teaching or facilitating this?
I'll take that first if you want. So we don't have a set curriculum per se. We actually use creative curriculum, which is a preschool curriculum that outlines the physical environment inside and the schedule for the day. But it is not a day-to-day, you know, this is what you teach day 1, day 2. There are no worksheets, just to be very clear. You can burn them in a fire if you want, but that the children have made, but that's it. But so when I say curriculum, it's what's happening day to day and the questions that the kids are asking and the way we scaffold that, their interest. the questions we ask of them. So emphasizing open-ended questions and observations, and them really digging in and exploring whatever it is they're interested in. Now, as teachers, that means I have to pay attention to what are they interested in today, what materials and opportunities can I provide for them, either today in the moment or tomorrow when they come back. What are some potential ways to extend that they may not have thought of? And we do this all the time in play. I mean, even just when you're playing with someone, a little kid hands you the phone, right? You've seen those memes that say if a 2-year-old hands you a phone, you always answer, right? So you always answer, and then you immediately start, oh, who is this? And you start making up stories, right? And you're extending their play. So it's the same kind of thing, but it's just happening outdoors. So we might introduce a new term if they're noticing that an insect, in fact, I can think of an example. We had kids notice this insect was hiding under the table, and you couldn't really see it because it matched the same color as the table. And in this case, one of the other kids actually said, oh, that's camouflage. But we could also help them label that once they understand, oh, I see, they understand the meaning of that word, and then we can label that for them. So yeah, curriculum, sometimes that phrase is a little misleading because it's not like, oh, here's what we're going to do today. And because now that's my teacher agenda, right? And that means it's not really child driven and emerging from their play.
To add to that, we have a weekly explorers group that we go to, and there's no agenda. It's just really kind of going in and observing and seeing and building on what they've learned the week before. What we really saw was great, let's say last spring, was going each week. We got to see how the woods changed, and that, produced conversations. And we, saw the caterpillars, and then we saw the chrysalis, and then we saw the butterflies, and that got us all talking. I mean, there's so many opportunities just being in nature where a conversation can be built and had from what they see around us. We have a bunch of logs that have fallen over, and they've turned it into a log playground. And so then they're all kind of working together. Then they've taken logs and they've built a shelter, and now they're starting to play and talk about it. I mean, they built their own shelter. At like, the oldest is 6. The youngest is in my group is 2. And they're really, kind of playing with it. But for them, play is work. And they're growing from all of those experiences. We had a for-school discoverers class where we would, we followed a little bit of a curriculum, and I'll let Claudine talk more about this, but this particular one that we did, we were talking about Fibonacci patterns and fractal patterns in nature. I mean, the learning that I got, and, my kids coming out of it couldn't say Fibonacci, but that's a word in my head now, and they got the idea of it, and it's something that we can grow on.
Yeah, that's just to add on to that, what Carrie was saying, the difference with having kind of a gentle suggested rhythm, in one of the classes we do with the creators, it's really just there's bringing one material or 2 materials in for the children to then kind of create open-endedly with. One of the things that we try to do is meet in the same location so that a lot of the things that Carrie was just talking about can happen, because, the first week you kind of, the kids go in and they're kind of just taking in their initial, environment. And one of the things I like to kind of talk about, if you walk into a really crowded party, when you first walk in, you're taking in all of what you see, and then as you spend more time there, you start to see one person, another person. It's kind of every week that the children go to the forest, they're going to start seeing the chrysalis and the logs in a different way. So when we introduce kind of this gentle rhythm where we go and we sing a song when we get together to let everyone know we're gathering, and then we walk together and we collect materials that we want to use that day, and then we kind of sit in the same location, and then the parents, the leaders will just put out some supplies. So maybe we're painting with mud that day, but we're going to give you paint and maybe something to paint on, but you have to find your paintbrush. So not only do you get to paint with mud, which is honestly one of my favorite things to do, but the children get to figure out how they want to make a paintbrush, and I've seen kids go and they use grass, they use flowers, or they use a rock, they use their boots. So it's just that creativity that comes out of just a gentle kind of suggestion of, we're going to create with these materials today, but they're still using their environment and creating things. And like Carrie says, sometimes we'll add a book in and we'll just read the book, and then it might create some other things that they're interested in, and then they kind of dive a little bit deeper in that. But it's really fun to see the difference in that they're still getting that free exploration, and we're just adding a little bit more for them to use for their own creativity.
So I kind of want to jump in here. As the student on the panel, I'm still kind of learning all of these things and playing with kids. I'm in speech pathology, so child-based or child-directed therapy is an evidence-based approach. And I know that going into this internship placement that I had, it was very intimidating for me to go in there and just let the child do what they wanted to do. And I feel like I have a question/comment, I guess. I want to say it takes practice on the part of the facilitator, I think, as well, to learn to step back, but also learn what questions to ask, and when and what questions are appropriate, and how can you facilitate more. I know I work a lot I'm in the preschool right now, so I work a lot on answering WH questions. And when they have a dollhouse, how can I ask as many different WH questions as possible given that child's level with this certain thing, whatever they're playing with. But, I guess now my question would be, did you guys have that fear when you were going into it of how can you help your kids, and how do you know when to step in and when to step back in terms of the gentle flow that you were talking about, or in terms of working with the curriculum or anything like that?
That's a great question, Dana. And you're right, it does take some almost like practice for us to take a different approach, right? So it's very common to kind of be in the environment and want to kind of lead in that sense of in that traditional kind of sense. One of the things that I do coach with leaders and talk to parents with is how to do that, and how to take a moment and watch. And sometimes I even have to tell myself, count to 10, just count to 10, watch and count to 10. Because usually with less than, before I get to 10, they're either asking a different question, they're exploring into something else before I have then said it for them, and letting them explore. Or sometimes even maybe I'll be walking and I'll see something and I'll go over and not say anything, but maybe I found a new flower, or I found a branch that was down, or a tree that had recently fallen, and I'll just go over and look and check it out. And it's very common that they'll just come over and they're like, what's going on? What are you doing? What did you find? All of those questions. And then it starts a conversation that they want to hear. And it's not something that I initiated. So it is a little bit of a different thinking, where we're trying to take that pause and stay back and see what is their interest today, following your child's footsteps, in a sense of saying, what are they going to find, and what are we going to learn today, and what are we going to see? And sometimes it might be the same thing over and over again, but then it'll change. And I think there's something really magical about experiencing that. And that's why I remind myself, count to 10, because usually when I take that moment, I'm patient on that, something amazing will happen. My youngest, who wasn't really into writing or letters, she wrote her first letter in the sand on the side of the Delaware River. So that was the first time she wrote a letter, was out in nature, because that was when she wanted to do it. So I've seen a lot of first things happen because of that kind of waiting and letting them explore and seeing that. So, but in the sense of how, I think it's definitely something that we have to work on and think about and have a lot of patience for. That's what I've learned is finding your absolute ability to be patient, because it's so easy, especially if you come from a traditional sense of education, it's kind of ingrained to just kind of jump in there and say something. So hopefully that answers your question, but that's been my experience, and also something that we talk about a lot.
I think just to add on to that, Claudine, there were a couple things that you mentioned as you talked about, but to make more explicit is what you're talking about there. One is that you were modeling the observations yourself. And I think we forget sometimes to do that as adults. Especially, I don't know what it is, but in preschool, we're so worried about numbers and letters and, what color is it? How big is it? Is it bigger than that one? Is it bigger than that one? And the kid is just like, enough. Like, what is this? Like, are you crazy? Like these crazy adults, So we do all of this questioning. So like you were saying, picking carefully what those questions are, but also modeling for them. And even just as simple as what you were saying, like, oh, what is this? I wonder what this is. Or just sort of making explicit and out loud our own thinking, our own questioning, our own observations. So then the kids start to see that as a model. So that was one thing I thought of as you were talking. But the other thing, Claudine, as you were talking, you talked about this delay, this times, and we forget that silence is actually an incredible tool, right? And I think it's easier outside for some reason, which is a good thing. Inside, everyone wants to just, it's all this noise, right? So we just keep adding to it and feel like we have to fill that space. But it's okay it's okay even, first of all, to ask a question and not get a response from a child and to let it go. You don't have to follow up with, no, really, I want to know what you think, right? Maybe they don't want to tell you right now what they think. Or maybe they need to think about that. Maybe it was really a deep question. If you're asking a good question, it should be a deep one that takes a little time. But also to have time to just observe and not even ask anything, to just let things be. Which reminds me of another thing I made a note earlier is someone was talking about, I think it was Claudine and Carrie both, you talked about going back to the same space. And that's some of that silence pedagogy or that pedagogical tool, right? That if you're visiting the same space and you have time to just be quiet, you start to notice patterns. You start to see how things have changed from day to day through the seasons, but also things that haven't changed, things that are staying the same. And those are where we talk about science. We spend all this time talking about STEM, and well, gosh, there's your science exploration. That's meaningful. So I just, as you were talking, those are a couple things I thought of.
If I could add on even more, I think the idea of the preschool education expectation is, you kind of need to let that go from a nature immersed or for school kind of early education perspective, and the expectation that they're going to be learning the alphabet and the colors when you've said that they are, I think is really important. Maybe one of the benefits I have as a homeschooling mom is I don't feel like my 6-year-old needs to be reading now. I'm kind of letting him do that as it seems to work for him. And I'm following what he's interested in. And, for one day last summer, it was, how the sun kind of moves around the earth and when your shadows get longer or shorter. So it's really letting go of what the expectation is and what they have to learn that day and just trusting that they're learning.
I think something else that's important to add, Carrie, is what it seems like is we as adults need to learn way more before the kids do. We need to accept that, our preschoolers don't need to be ready to go to college. Our preschoolers need to know how to play. Our preschoolers need to know how to explore, and they need to feel safe but then adventurous, and they need to feel loved but understand what it feels to feel hurt. And like I said, I was in formal school my whole life, and my mom is actually a paraprofessional in a preschool. She's a teacher's aide, but she always says that she has parents coming in this day and age. I feel like everything has shifted, but yet I'm grateful for things like this, that we're kind of coming back to the roots of what children really need at this point in their life, which is to play and to explore. And when my parents come to my mom and they ask, what are kids doing? What are you doing to help their writing? What are you doing to help their math and their reading? And she says, what I'm doing, I'm letting them play. They need to learn how to play. They need to hang out with their friends. And that's what they need to do at 4. This isn't college prep. This is playtime. And this is a time that's very important in their development. And we need to let them elaborate on that. So I think as adults, it's important. Message is just as important for the teachers. I know it is for the teachers, but I think we need to reflect on ourselves in this day and age and our expectations of 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. They should be playing, and that should be the expectation. And I'm very grateful that this kind of spreads that message as well.
Yeah, this is really fascinating to me. So as the host of this show, I'm coming to it from a very personal interest. I don't have a preschool age child. I have a teenager at this point, but I'm coming to this as an unschooling parent, and what I'm hearing in a preschool setting is really the principles that we practice through unschooling, which is child or interest-led education. And so I'm really inspired that this is taken into an actual formal setting, even though formal being the outdoors and nature. To me, that's really, really interesting. So Dana, you're talking about, parents coming in from traditional systems. I'm looking at it as a parent who's coming at it from a free learning, understanding or paradigm. So I think it's great. I think it's like, crossing over to all of these different worlds. And I think the work that you ladies are doing is amazing. So let me ask you a question. We're talking about preschool or early education, basically. Can nature-based education be extended through the different stages of life, through adolescence and even adulthood? Anybody want to talk about that?
Yes, I'd love to talk about that. One of my favorite things is when our groups are multi-age. It's one of the most amazing experiences to have, children of multiple ages learning from each other. I've had groups where we have children that are maybe 10 or even preteen, 12, 13 years old. And once we had a large group, and we also had 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds in this group. So we had a very large age range. And what we saw was that the children kind of created their own learning, and the older children really took the younger children as kind of like they wanted to show them the things they understood. They wanted to show them the things they were doing, and they really found their own way to collaborate, and it was really amazing to stand back and watch. I've also seen children, some people like to be in that group and be in a large group, and some of them don't. And I've seen other children really excel in these groups because they can go in the forest and find a tree and kind of go underneath maybe a little spot or find a little hideout, and maybe they are working on their own project. And I saw a few kids, two children who were not participating with the rest of the group were doing, but they went and they created an entire art gallery, and then they came and they invited the rest of the children to come into their art gallery, and then it became an entire group art gallery. And another time I saw how an entire parade was created from all of these ages. So I think it's important that this works really great with preschool, and we talk about the preschool age, but I think it's also really amazing for children of all ages. And I mean that is also for myself. I know Carrie talked a little bit about how, she's enjoyed so much to be learning with her children, and I've learned so much with my children, from what plants are growing in our area. I mean, I've learned so much about skunk cabbage this year, and just how it creates its own heat to get the snow out, So I think it's not just for preschoolers. I think this is really just for all of us, and anybody who wants to learn can learn. But I think it's something magical about the environment that you're in, and when you're outdoors and you're in that nature where you have the sun, right, you have the air, the fresh air that's out there, whether it's warm or cold. You're learning about the different elements around you. You might be learning, how do you stay dry when it's wet outside? How do you stay warm when it's cold outside? What does it mean when it's 20 degrees out, Mom? Well, stand out there in your pajamas, and then we'll put your gear on, and we'll see how you feel then. So, but I think for those older children, I think they can also find different ways to enjoy being outdoors, especially in the multi-age groups, because the older children can then kind of take on their own projects, but also share it with the younger children. Or if they have a different kind of need, depending on their personality, they can go off and have their own space and feel that similar, not maybe independence, but more of in a sense of freedom, where if they need a quiet space to go and think, that it's really easy to find that in the forest. And I think it's a very healthy environment for really any age.
So, and I'll add to that a little bit. So we have some camp programs, of course, for older kids, but we've done some work with the K-12 schools, particularly we have a few different programs we've done, but the preschool has grown to be into a nature-based kindergarten program. So in the U.S. kindergarten age, so 5-year-olds, and then first grade, so that's a local school district, and then now is growing into second grade. But then in the upper elementaries, we've had those same schools come out, and they'll spend a week at the nature center. So they're there every day, not as a residential program, but it's just their classroom. And I realize this is a little, it doesn't fit the unschooling, but the idea that these kids are really immersed in that and integrating that into their regular curriculum, and you definitely see them building a connection to that particular place and that space, asking different kinds of questions than they would inside, applying. We talk about science should be generalizable, right, to all sorts of different settings. You shouldn't just, I know about skunk cabbage in this one space, but I can apply what I know about skunk cabbage over here to something else that's happening, or that's why the snow around this tree has melted first, and so forth, and seeing patterns. But the one thing, especially with older kids, that I think really need to allow them time to have is the social aspect. So we talk a lot about social emotional development in little ones, which is really important. But in, upper elementary, middle school, they're learning, they want to be together, right? Middle schoolers, like, all you have to do is put a bunch of them together, and they can sit there and talk for hours and do absolutely nothing but be entertained, because they want to be with each other and talk with each other. And this gives them space to do that, but it also is a shared experience. And there's something really human, maybe is the word, I don't know, but where you're out, like, for example, it's really cold. It's been bitterly cold in Michigan right now. And you're freezing, and to come inside where it's warm and you all have this, like, we did it, we toughed it out, we had a great time, and now we're all warm. And there's something about that shared experience that is really positive from a social community building standpoint. And that's another benefit for those older kids, as well as all of the other things we've talked about.
Yeah, I was happy that you mentioned the social emotional. I just realized as I'm thinking about it, I failed to mention that I had a minor in psychology. I'm very interested in psychology and kind of the development of our brain and how we work and what makes us tick. But I know from personal experience, having time outside in my mid-late teens, I guess, it makes you think about how big this world is. And I think that's important for kids these days to realize that your backyard is not the only thing, and your house is not the only environment that this world is, and it gives you a broader perspective. And with that perspective, you're more open to learning about other cultures, about other people's experiences. You might feel a desire to go do something. And now I know I'm getting really deep, but you find kind of a spiritual or emotional calling of your life. And I feel like later in those teen years, that's really important. And I know that my experience outside has also, it has made my respect for nature, has grown my respect for nature, I guess I should say. So as a young adult, as a millennial, in terms of what we are doing to this world and how we're destroying it or whatever, I know that I feel very personally responsible, that I do my best to not use plastic, that I won't get the plastic bags anymore. I have the reusable bags. I'm using glass. I'm not using, these are all little things, and I turn the lights off every time I leave a room. Just things, and I feel like, staring at the wide open ocean and looking at the night sky and all of those things, it makes you realize how small you are, but how big of a difference you can make just by doing little things in your life. So, and I think later on in like your emotional years and your developing of that social emotional skill, I think that's really important as well.
So Dana has made me think of, so in nature-based preschools, we talk about them being the blending of environmental education and early childhood. But in Australia, there's a group of researchers in Australia and now throughout the world, but that have coined this term early childhood education for sustainability. So the idea, essentially what we would call environmental education, but I think has a, I don't know, has a little more forceful purpose to it, right? I don't know, it's a little more direct, gets to the point. But one of the things they talk about is one of the tenets of early childhood education for sustainability is viewing the children as being capable, where at whatever age they're at, that they are capable individuals and that they have a voice, and giving them agency in their own world. So, Dana, you talked about things that you're doing, but allowing kids, even if they're 3 and 4, they still have a voice, right? They can still be active agents in their world. Now, it needs to be developmentally appropriate, but if there's something that they want to change, then they should be able to change it. Even if it's just as simple as, hey, what should we have for a snack? Or should we go out, on this trail or that trail? But giving them opportunities to have their voice heard, and valuing them as capable individuals. And that can be as simple as letting them zip their own coat up, which I know seems really silly, but it's amazing how many times a parent's like, oh, let me help you. Well, no, they got to figure out how to zip their coat up. It might take 10 minutes. So don't start this lesson on the day that you're late for work, right? But it is important to have that lesson and give them the opportunity. And underlying in that is that philosophy that they are capable of doing this. They need some support to do it. So, for example, when they're taking off their gear, we might say, do you want to take your mittens off first or your hat off? Or you want to take your left boot or your right boot? You might give them some direction, but I'm not going to reach in there and do it for them unless they get all tangled up in their zipper or something, and then we'll help. But so that idea of agency and having a voice in their own space and being part of their community, right?
Yeah, these are really important aspects of education. And you touch on a little bit of taking a risk. So I want to get into that a little bit more, but first we're going to take a short break, and when we come back we're going to continue the conversation along those lines. So we'll be back after this.
Plant a little seed in the dark, dark ground. What does that seed need to grow? Out comes the great big purple milk.
idea behind the Forest School philosophy is that it is a child-led program, which means that the children get to play and the teachers do a really great job of observing what they're interested in. If a child is really interested in mushrooms, then that's the lesson for the week, for 2 weeks, for as long as they're interested in it. And the teachers help further that interest they might bring in magnifying glasses. They might bring in clay for them to build mushrooms. They might tell stories about mushrooms. But it's the children's interest that leads what's being learned. And myself, I learn that way. I don't want to learn something that I'm not interested in learning. And children are like that too.
Children, when they're learning in Mother Nature, they are learning more skills than just what meets the eye. So yes, they're learning physical skills like climbing or like running on rough terrain and that sort of thing. But what they're actually learning deep within themselves is skills for the future, like self-confidence or teamwork or, caring for the environment, that type of thing. So I think that can translate into their later lives in adulthood.
In a typical school, you might have a kitchen set where the kids know that that's where they play restaurant. Where here, the children have a tree with a hole in it, and that becomes their restaurant. But the teachers don't tell them that, the kids just start playing. So sometimes we have those children who just watch and learn from the other children, and it takes a while. I really believe, as an educator, sometimes we need to let children get bored. And we do. We have long periods of time where children can just sit and connect and watch other children and wait and not be told what to do. And then they see the stick as a stirring stick, or then they see the stick as they can discover with it. And in a very short period of time are just, it's almost second nature, second skin. They are loving the area that they're in. They're hugging the trees, literally. They're lying on the ground and discovering wood bugs, discovering, just being imaginative. And what's really neat is they are using their natural environment to be creative. It's just extremely valuable.
There's a maple box. Hey, goodness. There's some bugs under there. How do we get it? Guess what, Mom? This is Jack.
My son Manolo has some challenges. He has an autism diagnosis. So I was concerned about putting him in a typical preschool setting. I didn't think that he would do very well. And I came last year when he was still 2 to observe, and I was really impressed with the program, and I was impressed with all the teachers, and I just felt like it would be the best place for him. Even though everybody that I mentioned this to didn't feel like this was going to be a safe environment for him, I just knew in my heart that it was the best place. And once they came and visited the site as well and met the teachers and saw him in the setting, they all agreed that it was definitely by far the best place for him. He's really developed his imaginary play skills, which is one thing that he was really lacking in, and becoming a little bit more self-aware and responsible for himself. He really depended on everybody around him before and didn't really feel the need to develop any of those skills. He just would sit and let you do everything for him. He's really developed those a lot now. He's had to take on challenges on his own and learn how to negotiate things on his own. So that's been a huge change for him.
What does it feel like on your fingers?
Whoa.
Oh! Uh-oh! That's okay. Lucky the forest is soft.
If a child, for instance, is really interested in math or really interested in literacy, they can find things in the forest that are going to help extend that learning. So we might count pine cones, or that might mean finding sticks that look like letters, or drawing words in the sand, or that sort of thing. So there's a lot of opportunity for learning and, sort of a learning that families are wanting to see. They still are learning in the forest in those ways.
We are so academic driven in our society. We think, if we take them outside, they're going to miss out on reading and writing. They're going to miss out on math. And really, it's actually not true. The studies are that being outside and play-based education is where we need to go. And we have a lot of studies, and we're trying to get those research articles out to the public to make it more mainstream. And so on our website, we post resources for parents. And on those resources are all those articles and studies showing that how important this is. And for teachers as well, we have a resource page for teachers where they can look for activities and look for any article that they need to convince their parents on why this is so important. People are really scared of risk. Well, teachers need to be educated on risk management. They need to be educated on how to safely take children outside. But that's easy to do. We can do that, and teachers are keen to do that. And I think we need to embrace what teachers know and what parents know deep down is best in being outside. In my mind, and research is showing that it is best.
Children are way more self-sufficient and capable than a lot of adults give them credit for. And so in that, I often find myself literally standing with my hands behind my back to stop myself from jumping in certain situations with children. So be it if they're climbing a rock that I might feel uncomfortable, I might say, "Do you feel safe?" And they feel totally safe to do that.
I think that the experience in play and learning with play is so invaluable. I think that we spend so much time putting our kids in front of TVs and computers and trying to teach them mathematics and to read at such an early age. I think that we're losing those skills of self-confidence and ability that, to take on challenges on their own. And I think that nature really teaches them to be self-reliant.
Water, a tuna fish, a tuna fish. No.
This is being done in Europe. It has been being done for 50 years in Europe, and we are convinced every day how great it is. I've worked with children inside for many years, and it's just, there's something different about having a group of children outside. They look after each other. When someone falls, they help each other. It's a sense of community that develops in this outside setting that is really unique. And as a parent, I am so happy to see that learning is happening. I can wear two hats. I can wear the parent hat and the educator hat. Is stuff going to get taught? Are the kids going to still learn? And both of my children have gone through this program. And my daughter is now in kindergarten and is at the top of her class and had no formal inside education before that. And my son is here now, and he's so interested in reading and so interested in printing, and yet spends his day every day at school in the forest. So we're constantly learning, but it's being reinforced every day how powerful this situation is for us.
And we're back, and we hope that you enjoyed that video. I think it was a really great video sharing, really, giving those that are not familiar with nature-based education a little peek into what it might look like. So in the video, they actually talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about next, and it's actually where we left off the conversation before we left for break. What I want to talk about is, what does it look like to facilitate learners to be able to step outside of their comfort zone? And how do you do this in such a way that it's creating a safe environment? And also, I want to talk about some of the benefits of what some of you have coined as yes-based exploration. So why don't we take it from that point? And open the floor and let whoever wants to speak next jump in.
I'm going to start off with a quick story before all the professionals go into exactly what they do. Just a quick story in terms of the way that I was raised, and that I am no children, not for a little while now, but when I do have kids, I'm excited to let them fall. My parents always said, I have a brother who's 6 years younger than I am, and he was a monkey. He climbed all over everything, and people would always get nervous, and my parents said, well, if he falls, he'll only do it once. Let him learn. So granted, Jacob is still alive. Everything is all good. But I just wanted to share that personal experience that we have all fallen and learned to get back up. And I think it's physically risk-taking is an important aspect, but it also helps you grow in emotional ways as well. But I'll let everyone else talk about those, how you manage those risks.
So I have a great falling story. It was in our Explorers group, and my 6-year-old, who is like a tank. I mean, when this kid learned to walk, he would fall and nothing fazed him. And the kids were exploring a tree root system. A large tree had fallen over, and they played on this tree root system before, and they were digging at the dirt. And this time it gave way, and my son fell on his face and he broke his nose. And, we rushed to urgent care. And I'll tell you, the practitioners at the urgent care, our pediatrician and the ear, nose, and throat doctor that we saw afterwards to make sure his nose was okay, all said, yeah, but what you're doing is great. The kids need to be doing this. And the empathy that the other kids showed to him was really sweet. And they talked about it the next week, and they talked about the root system and the causes of the fall. And while I'd certainly never wish a broken nose on a 6-year-old, the learning that everyone got out of it was huge. To add on to that a little bit, I have a friend, and and she's always really encouraged me in the risky play kind of area. And we met up with our kids, both, I think like 5 and 3 at the time, at a very, structured, perfect, beautiful playground where no harm could ever happen. And her son fell off like a seat, just like one of those seats, and broke his arm. Not on a play structure, not climbing, doing anything scary, just rolled off and broke his arm. So, I mean, kids are going to fall and break themselves. And it's good, to give them, I think, the safe space to do it.
Just to kind of build off of what Carrie said, and I think that the risky play also really builds confidence. It also allows them to experience what they're capable of. And if they don't have this opportunity to try and to experience what they can do, and then maybe experience a little bit of what they're not sure they can do, the development that goes on during this kind of play is really invaluable on how it can really outcome in what they're experiencing emotionally and physically, and the physical aspect of climbing and all of that. It's just amazing what that does for the brain, and so many other things that we could talk about. But two experiences that come to mind for me is when once there was a tree that had fallen that was in our area for a very long time, but it fell in a way that it was on the ground and then elevated up. And some of the children would just climb up, and they would go right up to the top, and they were walking across about 6-7 feet high. And some other children, they would just kind of climb up just a little bit. And, the next week they climbed up a little bit more. And then maybe they hung out here and they would hang on it and do some more things that kind of brought their confidence to another level. And then the next week, maybe they went a little bit further. And then by the end of the month, they're climbing just like all the rest of the children were. But they were given that experience and that time to go at the speed that they wanted to go, so that the child that just wanted to run up to the top of the tree, and they did it and they were fine. And then the other child that said, hey, I want to do that. and I'm not ready to do that, but I want to do that, and given the space to build up to it. And another experience I think that is really important is when the children collaborate together and work together to support each other. It's one of the most, I don't know, it's just so heartwarming to watch a 3-year-old, you know, tell a 2-year-old that they can do it, or, you know, a 6-year-old tell a 4-year-old to do it, or maybe the 6-year-old is telling the 7-year-old that they can do it. But working together, you know, in a tree that we had that was really intertwined together, and there was all these branches, and it was fallen a long time ago, so they had to test the branches, which is another thing of testing their environment to see, you know, what is the risk that they're going to be taking. You know, it's not taking a blind risk, but it's talking about what happens if you touch that branch and you hear the creak, you know, do you keep going? But then talking to each other and saying, I was just over there, that branch is really loose, come over this way, I found a way this way, and let me help you get this foot over here, and watching how they work together. And I think it's easy to say, oh, okay, maybe they're just climbing a tree, but what they're really doing is they're learning how to collaborate, work together, they're doing teamwork, and they're also learning about their environment and finding ways to overcome their challenges. So I think there's just, I mean, I could talk about this for like 5 hours, just so many things that they can get out of just simply climbing a tree together. So it's just really amazing to see, you know, risky play. Some people might hear risky play. It's just something that, oh my goodness, it's too risky. But in a sense, it's really teaching so much about how to assess your risk and to actually be safe.
Yeah, oh, so many things I'm thinking right now. So I'll start on that because you say assessing the risk. One thing I think it's really important to do that we need to be explicit about with kids is getting them to assess the risk. So the first thing, so I think about asking 3 questions, and I keep talking about Claire Warden, but Claire Warden has talked about this, and Tim Gill from the UK, who did his book's Rethinking Childhood, I think is the title of one of his books. Anyway, they talk about risky play, and they talk about asking 3 questions of the kids. And the first is, what's good about this thing we're about to do? Why do we want to do it? So, you know, we want to climb a tree because it's fun and we get up high and we can see things and, right, all those reasons to do it. And so talking about the benefits, not just the risks, but then talking about, well, what might happen? What could hurt us? Well, a branch could break. You know, I could fall. So what are we going to do to keep ourselves safe? You know, how do we minimize that risk? And maybe they say, well, you know, that branch is not as thick, so I'm not going to step on that. Or, you know, I'm only going to put 1 foot on each branch because it's smaller, whatever but letting them come up with those answers. And like Claudia was just talking about, you know, referencing each other. And so being that they are positioned as experts, right? I'm the expert tree climber. I can give you some insight as opposed to the teacher. So then the kids become this resource for more information. So definitely weighing that benefit of risk. You talked about the cognitive engagement. I think so many times we talk about physical activity and we talk about playgrounds and, oh, it's just about being active, but it's really not. And in these natural play spaces, our brains have to be engaged. And I talk about the classic example of the slide, right? So you go up the steps of the slide, they're the same distance every day. The handrail's the same every day. When you're a toddler, you shimmy, and then you get to where you kind of hold and run up, and then you can run up the steps. And then every child on the planet, I don't care where they are, they all do this. They go to the bottom of the slide and they try to climb up it, right? Yeah, because they've already done the other thing. They're bored, and so they need something different. So that also is, you know, engaging other ways of their stimulation of what's exciting and interesting. But also then if you think about the steps, like we go up and down stairs without thinking about it. But the moment a step is slightly different than normal, it makes you pause, right? And you have to stop and go, whoa, what's going on? And you engage in a different way. So risky play and natural play spaces allow for that. And the other thing I think is really important, and I'll end with this and pass it on to someone else because, like, again, could go on about this forever, is we talk so much about physical risk and that a kid might get hurt. and we worry about broken bones and all of those things. And of course, we don't want any of that. No one wants a broken bone. But the classic line, right, that I can't remember who said it, but and I should know, but better a broken bone than a broken spirit, right? That we don't talk about intellectual risk. We don't talk about social emotional risk. We talk about this, physical risk of, oh, they might get hurt. Yeah, but what are all the things that they're losing out on if we don't allow them to climb that tree? So I'll end with that.
I'll jump in. Back to story time with Dana. I want to relate it back to the teenagers because we talked about how you work with, how you can integrate this, risky play with teenagers. My now sister-in-law, I guess she's still a teenager, but she started cliff jumping probably 2 years ago. She's a very good swimmer. So, there was never any fear of risk in terms of that. But I think that, the first time that I went cliff jumping, you think about what it takes for you to get to the edge and look down. I don't know if anyone's ever been, but it's intimidating. And it doesn't matter how brave you are or how many times you've done it. It's scary every time you do it. And I find that it's similar, as like my bio noted, I was a swimmer. I worked at a pool club just from the time I was 15 till as long as I could until I had to become a big kid. Watching little kids go off the diving board for the first time, it's a very similar situation. They're trying to figure out how bad is this going to be? And they walk all the way to the edge, and a lot of times they'll turn around and go back, and, people will, their parents say, oh, come on, you can do it, you can get up there. But I think what's important in the risky behavior is letting them do it on their own terms. But it's also fun to watch kids rally around from the age of 5, kids going off the diving board to my sister-in-law jumping off a 30-foot cliff. Your friends encourage you. It builds community. It's like, hey, I've done it. Listen, as long as you hold your arms like this, you're going to be fine. So kind of going back to what Claudine said about how, you rely on others and the community that you've built, and the social emotional aspect of trusting someone else when they say, listen, you're going to be okay. It takes a lot to trust someone when they say that, when you're staring down 30 feet. And I think that that's a life skill after, I don't know how many cliffs I've jumped off of, probably like 10 max, I don't know. But I'm a very trusting person. So if someone told me it was okay, I think that, it builds trust every time when you land and you really are okay. And if you aren't, it's only going to hurt for like 5 minutes, and then it passes and you know that you had fun. So that's what I always tell people. I'm like, what's the worst that happens? It hurts for 5 minutes. You got a broken nose, as Carrie said, it'll pass and you still have that memory forever. So I think that it can carry this whole risk play. It's important for, I love what Rachel said about assessing the risk and essentially figure how can you prevent any risk and the steps that those kids have to take. But it's the same process when you're trying to help a teenager with their frontal lobe and, impulse control, that they need to step back and they need to think about that as well. They aren't invincible. So it's a lesson that can be carried out from preschool all the way up until 25, probably more, but I know that at least as the frontal lobe is developing.
I think say with and that it's what, 27 years that their brain is fully developed, something like that. It's like 20, it's a few years sooner for women, but not much sooner. But so when we were talking about that, I was thinking about that idea of trusting your gut. You know, we talk about everyone telling people, oh, you trust your gut. But if you've never really experienced that feeling, how do you know how to trust it, right? You don't know what that thing is that's saying, oh, I don't know about this. So you have to have those opportunities to practice that a little bit. The other thing I was thinking about with this idea of physical play and the active play is a great new book that came out called Balanced and Barefoot. So Angela Hanscom is the author, and she's an occupational therapist. And so she talks about the benefits of this active play, and how if we just let kids play more often, we wouldn't need some of these therapies that we have, right? So if they have opportunities when they're climbing to cross the midline and do all those different kinds of play and balance and so forth, that there's lots of physical benefit, again, as well as all of these other things. But that was another resource that I think is really worth checking out.
I have, just because you mentioned trusting your gut, I have one more comment, kind of pulling it back to school. I would say I figured it out probably my sophomore year of undergraduate, that I am an extremely good test taker. Now, this is not something that people who are unschooling want to hear. I'm sure that tests aren't the way that I don't know if I'm like crossing any lines here, but in terms of what I've had to do to get to where I am and pursue my passion in speech therapy, all the tests I've had to take, I truly do believe that it comes, the skill that I have, it is a skill, test taking. And some of my friends kind of just ask me, they're like, Dana, what do you even, like, you're so smart. I'm like, honestly, we studied the same amount. I just feel like I'm a better test taker. And I think it's because I've learned to trust what I know. And that is, like, when I've studied, if I know that I've studied the material and I'm taking a test, I can trust what I know, and I don't have to second guess it. I don't have to look back and, analysis paralysis and then maybe change my answer, and then that would end up being the wrong answer, which a lot of times is what happens. I know that when I look at a question, I either know it or I don't, and I can answer it based on my gut. And as we've talked about all this, I feel like a lot of my success in school that I found thus far has come from a lot of things that I've learned from letting, my mom and, her encouraging me to play outside and trusting all these different things and being with my peers, and having confidence. Like, all of those things come from risky behavior and playing outside and, learning to socialize with friends. So I just thought that was an interesting connection back to the schooling part with trusting your gut.
Yeah, so as you said that, the idea of doing school, right? We talk about that, like, I'm good at doing school. I was thinking about connecting back to early childhood, and I think we talked about in the first half of the show, that academic pressure. I was thinking about Lillian Katz, who talks about not creating academic readiness, but cognitive readiness, so that they're ready to take on the world through experiences, but it isn't just about being academically ready. So as you were talking about that, it's like, yeah, it isn't just about can they get the right answer, but can they figure out and problem solve in the world?
Yeah, and it's not often within a school environment that kids get the opportunity to actually practice problem solving. So I can see the benefits. It's huge. I want to shift gears just a little bit and actually touch on something that the video that we saw touched on a little bit. And I was wondering if people on this panel could share a little bit of their experiences with working with kids with either sensory issues or kids on the spectrum, and the benefits that they see, working with kids in nature along those lines. So I'm just going to open up the floor with this question.
Sorry, I was struggling with my mute button. So yeah, I'd love to talk about this in the sense that I have experience where I've seen children who are, they might have a sensory issue, or even in the sense, maybe not touching sensory issue, but also just like sound, or dealing with other challenges that they might have, and how it's very different when they're outdoors in nature and in the forest. You know, as I'm not an expert in this topic, but I can speak as to my experience and seeing the difference and speaking to parents and what their challenges were with their child, maybe in the school or having their experience in the forest, is that when they're there, it's almost like they have a different sense of like the free play aspect takes a lot of the pressure off, maybe, and that they're able to explore things in a way that they need to, where, you know, maybe doing a sensory project that might be more guided, but being in nature, maybe mud is just much easier to touch, or maybe just the water from the stream is easier to touch in that sense. Also, for the sound aspect, when you're in the forest, sound is very different than when you're inside. And speaking myself, I actually have a sensitivity to very loud noises indoors, so I can understand this. When I'm in the forest, the world is just a different place for me. I'm just in a different calm. And myself, being an adult, having that calm brought to me just by being outside and having that sensory aspect being so different for me, I could only imagine what it's like for a child who might be struggling with not understanding what their struggle is really coming from. You know, I can maybe understand a little bit about my sensitivity, but when you're not even sure of why you're feeling that way, it can give them the sense of experiencing sounds in an environment where you don't have that echo off of the walls. Maybe you'll hear, you know, the sounds are just so different. So there's also just a very different calm when you're outdoors in that sense. Some of the experiences that I have seen is I had a child where when they were in groups, they really had the challenge of kind of speaking and talking, and you know, I'd known her daughter for almost 6 months, you know, but she never really opened up to the point of having a conversation, and it was that structured environment that was really holding her back. And I had suggested, why don't you try an explorers group where there really isn't any structure and they're just free to kind of do what they want to do, and her daughter really blossomed in that environment. So I think it's important where, you know, some children might do better in a very gentle structure, and then some children might do better with not having that structure. As you know, her daughter was in more structure during other classes, but when she came to the forest, I would say within the month, I mean, her and I started having conversations. I heard what her voice sounded like, and she just had such a different experience being in that environment. So I think it's really important to allow children to have that experience when they are having those challenges.
I have a quick comment. I think everything that Claudine said is awesome, and having those kids. I've seen children with autism, nonverbal children, blossom when I was in a structured environment. I let them just pick out whatever toy they wanted instead of doing the toy that I thought I would want them to play with that day. And you know, my kid, who I hadn't heard his voice, said 5 words for me because I let him pick the toy he wanted to play with. But I have a heart for kids with autism of all ages, so I had them in mind when we were talking about the curriculum and how you mentioned how you always come back to a certain location. And I know from experience that even just that one form of routine, we do know like routine is pretty good. It helps for children with autism to kind of regulate themselves and to know what to expect, and they can handle the situation. And so I think people might be a little intimidated, if anyone's watching that might be intimidated by this whole nature aspect of it for a child who is completely self-directed or anything like that, that there's still some form of routine that you all talked about of coming back to that same space. And they know that when they go out to the woods, they'll start in this space, then they can go play, and they'll come back, and then they can go home. And just that simple structure of them knowing what to expect could help them stay regulated, but it also gives them the space to explore, like Claudine said. So I just thought that was interesting.
So, okay, I have to make one plug for a friend of mine who is, he has autism. He has a business called Tux Toques, and like toques, like, you know, warm hats. And it's all, he and his dad travel around, have done unschooling, traveling around the country, doing outdoor pursuits. And he was a camper of ours, and anyway, I've known him for years. So check that out. My little plug for him. But absolutely the benefits. First of all, let me just back up and say, in formal education, we talk about how do we adapt a classroom to support these kids. And the first things we talk about almost always are natural light. So turn off the, fluorescent lights, get more natural light in, reduce the sound. We go through all of these environmental things where if you go outside, those things are taken care of. Gone, right? There's an easy solution to all of that. And it's even children that are typically developing, from a neurological, typically developing standpoint, they still benefit from, their behaviors are better when they're outside. There isn't this conflict on each other's physical space, but in our bubble, the loud volume, there's just so much, it's just so much better for everyone, and less stressful. And in fact, the teachers and I often joke about, like, if there's really bad, if it's really cold, like it has been, we'll shorten time outside and come inside for longer periods of time. And we often just say, how do traditional teachers do this? Like, it just drives me nuts because it's just so loud and so much. So, and I'm not trying to minimize the fact that there's absolutely benefits for those with special needs, but also remembering that everyone benefits from that. And we see that in many different ways, from behavior outbursts to, engagement, to those kids that maybe haven't been verbal but now are, which, by the way, also then extends, if you're thinking about that, English language learners, we see a lot of value in being outside, and that there's more things to talk about, right? You want to come up, what are the words for this? What do I call this thing? And so we want to know more. It has more meaning than just repeating some worksheet or label on, objects in the room. So that's a little bit of a side note, but something I was thinking about as we were talking about language.
I think, to continue on your side note, I said it in my intro, I don't know how homeschooling moms do it without sending their kids out in nature. It really, when we're having a bad day and nothing's going right, there's lots of screaming because my 4-year-old's a girl and she does a lot of screaming. We can go outside, and if she needs to scream, she can get it all out. And if my 6-year-old needs to run and bang things, we have at our house, we have an outdoor play area where it's just like free play, random garbage that they can build with. But maybe they're out there for 10 minutes, maybe they're out there for 3 hours, and they come back almost new kids. And I know, I can see in my son when he just needs some time, and he'll just go out to a sandbox and just drive cars in it back and forth, and it just centers him. It's that kind of like quiet outdoor time that helps him kind of refocus and bring him back to being the sweet kid that I know is in there.
I'll add something to what you were saying, Carrie. I recently went to our annual convention for speech therapy, and I went to a class on behavior management and how, we think that we know how to change a child's behavior, and oftentimes it's through punishment is the traditional way. And what you were just saying about how your son sometimes just needs space made me think about this one speaker, because she was talking about, she works with children with autism or sensory integration issues and things like that, and how, there could be 3 tiny things that happen that day, but it would lead up to a burst in dinner time. And we might not understand that burst, and we might say, you can't do that, you're not supposed to run outside, you're supposed to stay and sit in here and whatnot. But figuring out why or what they needed instead of, even before that happened. So if you notice their signs and you pick up on their cues, which is something everyone was talking about, standing back and observing, I feel like you can really get in touch with a child's cues and what they do when they're starting to get restless or when they're starting to get frustrated or upset. You can, as Rachel was kind of commenting on the language aspect of that, oh, I see that you're getting upset. You can teach them those emotional words and all those kinds of things. And you can give them the space in nature to kind of let that out before a behavioral issue occurs. Like I said, I don't have kids and I don't work outside, but I can just see how well that would, the woman who spoke about it, I could see how that could be implemented in nature, of noticing what they need and giving them the space and the materials, or, you know, the boundaries if necessary, to do what they need to do to kind of center themselves before a behavioral issue comes out, which is usually with kids with autism or kids with sensory issues. Most behavioral things stem from something sensory is too much, something they can't handle, and the only way they know how to show you is by hitting someone or screaming or tantruming. And if we can figure out what they need before they tantrum, then we can have positive behavior all the time.
Yeah, I'd like to build off of what you were just talking about, and that how the environment that we're in kind of changes things, where, you know, if your sensory is different when you're in a room, where, you know, the acoustics might be different. When you're outside, the environment is just different for the child's experience. But also I want to talk about a little bit in doing, you know, nature school and child-directed, there's a different sense of patience, and there's a different sense of what needs to be done. Maybe in a traditional setting with more structure, you know, there's, you know, we're going to do this, and then we need to move on to this next topic, and then we need to move on to this next topic. And when you're in a free play environment, you know, the children might gather in, we all want to kind of go check out what's living underneath this rock. But, you know, if another child needs to go to a different place and kind of explore something different, they can, and they can also collaborate in a way that they want to. You know, one of the things that I always find amazing is if there is a log in the forest, anywhere that we are, the children will get together collaboratively and figure out how to move it from one place to the next, with no real understanding as to why it needs to move, what their plan is, but they are all very committed to moving this very large branch. It's usually bigger, twice the size of all of them, but they work together to move it. But I think I wanted to talk a little bit more about just the patience aspect of it, you know, and as observers, I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, being the leaders and the parents that are involved. We are more of an observer than a leader. We talked a little bit about modeling also, where we're not bringing something to what we're going to the child. We might be experiencing something ourselves that then they become interested in. And Dana talked a little bit about this, about when she let the child choose their own toy. You know, so when the child can walk through the forest and they know what their direction that they're going, and they know the environment that they're going to, and they usually run to the space that we go to every week, you know, they're going to pick up the stick they want, and the leaf that's interesting to them, and the rock that's interesting to them. And as observers, we're kind of watching this unfold, and it takes a lot of pressure off of the child to then be able to maybe express what they're feeling, and to get through those challenges that they might be having in a very different way, and communicating with the parent or with the teacher, depending on if you have a teacher in a nature school or if it's a parent-led group. But there's just an overall different feeling of patience and a calm almost, where you can kind of dive a little bit deeper into the emotions that are happening, because they're not being red flagged, and they're not being heightened by the other sensory issues that are happening around them. So I just kind of wanted to add that aspect, because I think you know, the modeling aspect and the patience in that environment of the feeling, it's not just what you're seeing, but it's also what we're feeling by being surrounded by the nature that we're in.
So a slightly different direction, but building off of that idea of adults being observers, kind of brings us full circle back to the very beginning and the introduction. I think you talked about Carrie's introduction as talking about the yes zone, which I love, by the way. I might be making t-shirts and billboards. I'm not really a big supporter of billboards, but this one might need to be on one. But the idea that we allow kids to do things that we, as adults, we tend to say no. We're constantly like, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. And 9 times out of 10, it is because we don't want to have to deal with it, right? We don't want to clean up. We don't want to deal with whatever conflict might arise, even though it hasn't happened yet. So we're anticipating challenges down the road. So we're like, no, don't do that. And so really embracing that yes zone, which I love, Carrie, by the way, I love that. And allowing them to try things. Like, yeah, there's no point. As an adult, I might say, why do you kids want to move that log? There's no point in moving that log. It's here. You're just going to move it 5 feet. There's no purpose. But why say no? Why not allow them to do that? You know? And I realize that's a little bit of a different direction, but I think that's sort of this another one of the underlying philosophies of this nature-based approach is that we're allowing them as much as we can to try things. Now, sure, there are times where it's just plain old not safe, and we need to say, hey, that's not safe. But most of the time, that isn't the case. Most of the time, we're saying no because we just don't want to have to deal with it. And so I constantly, when I'm working with teachers, I'm just constantly asking, why are you saying no to that? Question yourself. When you're about to say no, stop and say, why am I saying no? And it's usually because you just don't want to deal with the aftermath, which I get. And if you're leaving in 5 minutes, again, that's not the time, but most of the time it's okay to say yes and embrace Carrie's yes zone. Bumper stickers, maybe bumper stickers would be good.
I like it. I like it. And I think, one of the benefits of being in the forest is like, you roll over a log, who cares? And a little extra preparedness. We have near our parking lot a big pit that when it rains a lot, it gets really muddy. So we know we have to pack extra clothes. And we say to the kids, if you can get through this and get into the forest without playing in it, I promise you, when we're done, you get some mud time. And, what's the worst that happens? You just have muddy stuff. I drive a Subaru. That's what it's for, right?
That should be Subaru's new slogan. It's not just love, but it's also nature learning.
Yeah.
Have a whole, I like it. We're going to have to talk to them about that.
Yeah.
But I think back to actually, Claudine, you talked about it with dressing for the weather. And you mentioned it in another story, but it was like, they don't want to put on their outdoor gear. Then, okay, don't put on your outdoor gear. We're going to go outside. And that's a classic battle that parents have all the time with their kids, like, put on this coat, put on the coat. And the kid's like, no. And why would they put it on? They're warm right now. Why would I put on that hot thing? So, okay, I'm going to go outside and realize, oh, that's why I wear a coat, is because it's cold outside, and making those connections, to start to realize that they're decision makers in their own world and not having the battle. Just don't have the battle. Let the kids figure that out.
Yes, I absolutely love this topic of how to be outdoors. And this is a question I get all the time is, are you going today? And I'm like, yeah, we're going today. It's Tuesday, whatever day that we go. And they're like, okay, but it's raining. And I'm like, yeah, I love rain. It's one of my favorite things. The forest is so green and, by the way, muddy. So I think it's important to talk about how to experience the forest and to be outdoors in nature, not only on that perfect 75 or 80 degree weather day where you just feel like, oh yes, let's be outdoors. How are you outdoors when it's really hot? How are you outdoors when it's really cold, really wet? And what does that look like? And when it's really hot, well, you wear clothes that keep you cool. You also go to a location in the forest where there's shade. There's natural cooling in the forest. It's amazing. And we even have this space where it's between 2 very large hills, and it creates this nice valley. And you're able to be covered from the wind. Wind is another aspect. So learning how to be in these environments where the weather is an aspect, but finding how to enjoy them. One of my daughter's favorite things to do is mud sliding. She will find any place that she can climb up a bit, and she is sliding down in the mud, and she creates a slide that then you have to figure out how to climb up. It's not even steps. It's slippery up and it's slippery down. But if you have the right gear, and then they understand why they wear the gear, because then you're outdoors longer, they're going to have such an amazing experience that they're going to want to put their gear on. And a lot of people ask, how do you get your kids to put your gear on? It's winter. We're now wearing a wool layer, and then we wear a fleece layer, and then we wear a waterproof layer. We have 2 pairs of socks on, and our boots, and our hat, and our balaclavas. And balaclava is probably one of the first words both my children said, and then, mommy wears my wool gloves and my mittens. So it's just, they understand that all of these things will let them to touch the snow, experience the ice, and be able to go out and, stand on a puddle, but it's now ice. So last week, and this is just amazing when this happens in where we live, and I just love having all 4 seasons for this reason, because, when the fall is turning into winter, you're tromping in this puddle and it's splashing all over and making mud. And then next week you go and it's ice, and you see leaves frozen in the ice, and you're standing on something that was splashing all over you last week. And it's just amazing to watch how they're just fascinated on how the environment changes. And there's so much learning going on in this experience. We could talk all about all the different science or math and all the different topics that they're learning about, just experiencing water, ice, snow, mud, but also we're touching on how to take care of yourself, how to take care of your body. If I go out and I'm not wearing my warm clothes, then I'm going to be outside maybe for 15 minutes, maybe 10. But if I wear my gear, I can be out for like an hour, and I can do all of those things. And then another aspect is also getting wet when it's cold. It happens. And what do we do? For the child, it is an experience that they have, and understanding, like, if we get wet and we get too cold, that is not safe. And, this is just a different side of kind of maybe risky play, in a sense of, if you go walking in the river that's not frozen, and you go into the water and you get wet and then you get cold, we have to leave. I can't let you stay out. We can bring extra clothes to a certain degree, but I think all of these aspects of all-weather play is really important, because it does teach a lot of life lessons. And this is not just talking on a preschooler level. We're also talking on the older children level too, where we were saying the impulse control, right? So, do you want to cross that river that might not be frozen all the way, and then getting wet and cold? When you're out in the rain, how can we find shelter in the rain? The kids found a bridge so that they could go under the bridge when it's raining and eat their snacks, so they can refuel and go play in the rain some more. So all of these things really do teach a lot of life lessons and ways to enhance their play and to elongate their play in all of these environments, which I'm sure somebody else has another story or an experience that they've had, because this is just something I'm very passionate about, because we've had so much fun in weather that's not just bright and sunny and maybe just a little cloudy, to the point where summer ends, my daughter says, is winter here yet? So I think it's really great that if we could just talk a little bit more about that, because I think all weather play is something that not everyone is sure of how they can do it.
Well, you asked for stories, so Dana's here for all the stories. I have a few, but I'll try to keep it short. I can think of the first one was when my brother was a soccer player, and soccer is in a strange season that it's like sometimes really warm, but then sometimes like really, really, really cold. So I went to a game. I think I was probably 6, maybe 5, and I still remember it. Clear as day. I was with my cousin, and it had rained the day before, and the field was a muddy mess, which to me was awesome. And to my mom, she thought that was awesome too, because I was occupied the whole time. I was there with my cousin, and we had taken my brother's soccer ball, and we were determined to hide it from him. Now, if you want to talk about problem solving, I was determined to get this ball out of sight. it was never going to happen. It was an open field, as we talked about. It's not always just in the forest. It was a soccer field. It was a grassy field. And I thought that if I put enough mud on it, that it would disappear. I learned that lesson. That was not true. But my cousin and I were completely covered in mud, like just from head to toe. We went mud sliding. We were with our hands. We were all over, but we had layers on, as Claudine just talked about. You know, we were prepared. Our bodies were protected, but we were messy. And my mom said, like, everyone was asking her that day, you know, are you really going to let them get that messy? And she said, well, they're wearing long johns. I'll just take off all the outside clothes when we get in the car. It's fine. Like, they can sit in the trunk. It's going to be okay. And so that's one of my favorite stories, because I still, to this day, I think like probably 2 years ago was the last time I went mudsliding, but we were camping and we went slip and sliding on the grass. It was great. And then another story, well, it's not really a story, but I'll skip some of my other stories. But essentially, I feel like the importance of learning what Claudine was saying, especially in the cold weather. Like in the hot weather, for me, it was easy because I was a swimmer. As long as I was in a bathing suit, it was fine. I could jump in whatever body of water was near. But in the wintertime, I was always excited, like Claudine's daughter, I was always excited to get my gloves on. I said, where's my snowsuit? I want my snowsuit, because we love to play outside. And I think over the years of playing outside and learning what it takes to be warm in the winter is also important for, as a woman, for self-esteem. For me to go out and, like, you can't look pretty when you're really cold. You can't. It's not a thing. You can't wear cute clothes. It's not okay. And so I remember being in college, and it got really cold in the winter one winter, and I was walking around in this parka with my hat and my scarves and my gloves, and I was like, I am going to be warm no matter what. And I would see people who were wearing, you know, their light jacket with a shirt similar to this, and I was like, you are crazy. But I think that whole process of learning, you know, what is important and what's safe in terms of different weather is also good for your self-esteem. Like, I learned, you know, hey, I want to be warm and I want to have fun. So I'm going to put my snowsuit on. I'm going to put my big jacket on. I'm going to wear a scarf, and I'm not going to wear makeup today. Whoa. In this world of what, you know, magazines tell you to look like, having fun and exploring is so much better than thinking that you need to look pretty. So I think that was talking about, you know, throughout, like, it was a lesson I learned early on, but as it carried out through my life, now that I'm reflecting on it, I think that was important in me understanding, having confidence to, you know, it's okay if I don't look very nice today because it's freezing and I need to wear 8 layers. And I think that that's an important lesson to learn later on in life as well.
Yeah, function over fashion is definitely important. Although our kids, I have to say, some of our girls have really mastered the tutu rain boot look. It's quite a fashionable statement. So you can do both to some degree. But I think both of you have just talked about the importance of dressing for the weather and whatever that is for your particular environment. And like for us in Michigan, the hardest times are early fall and spring. So mainly like in the springtime when the snow is melted, so there's wet, but it's still cold, you know, and you have this, whenever you get the moisture in, it just causes some challenges. So, you know, teaching kids how to dress appropriately and remembering that we want this to be a positive outdoor experience. We are not hardcore. Like, this isn't, we're not like training them to be in the army, right? This is just a positive outdoor experience. And we all know there are times where it's like, this rain is pouring down and it's cold and I want to go inside and have a cup of hot chocolate. And that's okay. Like, that's okay too. And let the kids be the voice. If the kids are having a great time, then great. But you'll know when they're done, when they're starting to whine and the umbles, as we talk about it, like, in fact, wilderness first responders talk about that. So when they're grumbling or stumbling, then you know that they're having some cold issues, especially. And so we use that with kids too. When they start complaining and grumbling, or they're stumbling and falling over, then you know, okay, it's time to be done, because you want it to be positive. giving them the tools to enjoy that outdoor time, so that they know how to dress and they know how to also solve their own problems. Oh, I got my glove wet. Where do I go to get more gloves? And having a resource that way as well.
I will say that now that we've all talked about how important well, first actually let me talk about your tutu and rainbow look. My daughter has used a Merida princess dress as one of her layers, and man, she could climb those rocks just as well as anyone else could. And yeah, it's definitely about listening to the children when they say they're done. My daughter, when it gets cold out, she doesn't like to go outside when it hurts to breathe. And St. Nicholas got her wool socks, and she has warm boots, and she has warm gloves and warm hats, but there's nothing I could put over her face right now that she'll tolerate being able to breathe in the cold air. But also having that change of clothes in the car too, when they've kind of like sweated through the first layer, and then you can kind of get them into that next layer in the car, has helped us a lot with meltdowns. And typically my daughter, my 4-year-old, will want to leave before my 6-year-old does. And I'll say to her, listen, you got to talk to him. This is a negotiation between you two. And so they're working on their negotiation skills. He's like, all right, 5 more minutes. And she's like, 1 more minute. And eventually we all leave, and they're mostly happy.
I cannot believe how quickly this time has flown. 2 hours have basically gone by already, and there's so much more to talk about. But thank you, ladies. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I'm going to go around to each of our panelists and invite you to share any closing remarks. Perhaps you want to share something that somebody who is sort of on the fence about nature-based education might need to hear, and maybe there's something you can share that would help them step outside of their comfort zone and see how this can benefit them and their families and their children. Also, after your closing remarks, I invite you to share any projects or websites, and I will remind our audience that you can find their links on the show notes page. So let's go to Claudine first.
First, I'd like to say this has been so much fun for me. I really enjoyed, talking with everyone and just talking about something that I'm very passionate about. And to speak, as you said, to the person who might be on the fence about, being outdoor in nature and learning. Maybe it's because you've never done it and you're not sure how to be outside, or what you need to be outside, what gear you need, what do I bring. I challenge you to take that first step and go in an environment that you're comfortable in. We talked a lot about being out in the forest, but you can simply just maybe commit to being outside in your backyard, or taking a walk to a park nearby, and doing that just to find where you're comfortable to maybe bring yourself to the next step. In speaking from working with somebody who did have that fear of being outdoors in the forest, we worked together where she then eventually led a group. She went from where she didn't want to be in the forest, she was not comfortable with it, but she really wanted her children to have the experience. And she started with just what she was comfortable with. Start in the season that you're most comfortable with. And then you can start working on experiencing all weather, because you really can find it's not just learning, but we talked a lot about just spirituality and just finding yourself and reflecting on things and finding calm. And it's healthy not only for the children, but it's also healthy for us. So that's where I would say just start where you're comfortable and then work on the rest. And to just talk a little bit about the project that I am working on, what our focus is to help people be outdoors. And it's to help people that are, I've been outdoors my whole life and I want to continue it with my children, to I have never done this. I don't even know what to pack in my bag. What do we eat? That's what we're here for. Our website has a blog that talks about all of these topics, about what to wear, how to be outdoors in that weather, how to follow your child's lead. We talked a lot about, stepping back and being a model or also being an observer. These are all things that we talk about because we want to give the resources to everybody to be able to experience being outdoors. And I know we talked a lot about, homeschooling or unschooling, but, there is an aspect of where children who are in a traditional school, and whether it's private or public school, they can also experience this. We do have groups where, parents have started groups that meet after their class. So once a week they all meet in the forest, and they meet after school. And I think it's a really great way to add on to what that child's experiencing in the school setting, is to give them the opportunity to have the free play. I don't think that this is just for a homeschooler in any way. I think this is really for everybody, and any family that wants to experience the benefits of being outdoors, you absolutely can. And Forest School for All, that's what our mission is to support you in doing that, whether it's leading your own group or finding a group. We do collect information for any kind of outdoor nature groups to put on our map to help people find the group that's right for them. So I would say start with what you're comfortable with and grow from there, and definitely visit our website, forestschoolforall.com, to get resources to help you get started. And I'd like to just say thank you for having me on this panel. This was really exciting to be able to share my experiences and to also hear from all of you and collaborate together on this topic that I truly believe is important for all of us.
Okay, so I will start my closing remarks. I do want to say thank you. I know I'm not a professional in the field yet, a professional in any field, so I guess my plug would be if you're looking for a speech therapist. No, but I want to say I'm excited that I'm very happy to be a part of this, because I am someone who is in a field that is leaning towards embracing technology. And I have been a substitute teacher in middle school, where I've seen every child issued an iPad. All work is done on an iPad. I'm in a preschool where and they have library and technology that come to their classes once a week now. So the iPad comes to their class. And I think that there are some benefits to that, but honestly, as someone who was raised playing outside, I'm a little terrified as well. I know I intend on bringing my kids out into the world, and you don't get a cell phone until you go to middle school, and you don't, or even high school, I don't know. But I think that in today's world, this is a really important message to share. So I'm very grateful that I got to be a part of this. And I just want to, for those, as we want to talk about the people who are might be skeptical about this, we've talked a lot, and I've learned in the past 2 hours about how this can be so beneficial, not only for typically developing children, but also children with special needs or sensory issues. There's a place for everyone. And I think finding that there's a place for your child, but also a place for you. As Claudine said, this might be scary. I know when just stepping into child-directed play, it's very intimidating and you might not know what to do. But as I am not a mother, but do talk about being a mother, when my husband brings up kids and how cute they are, I say, listen, it's not about you. When we have kids, it's about them. And so I think what's important is remembering that it's about them and doing what's best for them. And so as Claudine said, if you're uncomfortable, maybe stepping out in whatever way that's closest to your comfort zone, and then slowly stretching that to hopefully be fully immersed if you want to, but just following your child's lead and doing what you truly believe is best for them. Because in a world of information that says that everything is great for them, we know that the nature has always been around. So I can't imagine that would ever fail us. So that would be my little note for someone who might be skeptical. So thank you again for having me, and I hope you enjoyed all the story times.
All right, well, I will go next. Thank you, and this has been a lot of fun. You never know how this is going to go with people all over the country, all over the world, talking to each other. But this has been a lot of fun, and I have to share one story, really for Dana, since you're a story person, but also as a word of caution as you're going to the speech therapy. So we had a speech therapist come and work with a couple of our kids. and she wanted to work on the B sound, right, that B. And so she had a picture of a bird, and she asked them, what is this? And they, as good nature preschoolers, responded, woodpecker. So be careful what you ask them and what photos you provide for them. So there you go. That's my story for you. So as far as those folks that are on the fence, I mean, I think both Claudine and Dana have talked about this idea of take baby steps and move towards this nature approach. You do not have to do it all at once. You do not have to spend your whole day outside every day. And definitely don't start it. It's sort of like starting a diet, right? You know, like don't start on Christmas when there's all these Christmas cookies. Like, come on, you know, like you got to set yourself up for success. So it's the same kind of thing. Don't do it in the heart of winter. Do it when you're comfortable being outside, when you know there's some interesting things, and start small. Maybe it's just a little bit of time, an hour or 20 minutes even, you know, but work your way up. And maybe you try like, okay, I'm going to let them climb on that log. And it's really uncomfortable for me right now. And I'm dealing with my own stuff as an adult, but I'm going to let them try this. So, you know, you take those baby steps to move towards this more nature-based approach. And that can be in all sorts of different ways. The way we interact with the kids, our teacher-child interactions, how we set up the environment for them, how we schedule our day. You know, if maybe I'm going to start by going outside first and do that first thing in the day, and then, you know, do everything else later, which, by the way, we didn't talk about that, but there's lots of benefits too of having that outdoor time first. Again, so many things we can talk about, but slowly move towards this. And I think I have yet to meet someone who has tried it with genuine effort and been disappointed. Usually if they're disappointed, it's because they didn't want to believe in the first place, and so they set themselves up for failure. As far as my work, now, you know, I'm doing a lot of professional development workshops, so I have a website, rachellarimer.com, which you can find on the show notes. But I'm also doing some research projects. I'm working with David Sobel of Antioch University, and we're looking at some nature-based preschools and what are the outcomes from a nature-based program versus a traditional one, you know, whatever are there differences in language development, executive function, and so forth. So lots of things happening that way. And of course, I'm part of Natural Start Alliance, which I would encourage anyone to be part of. It's free, get on their newsletter, but it's a nice, you know, collaborative group of like-minded folks who want to get kids outside, especially in the early years, but any year is fine, right? And then of course, Children in Nature Network, if you're not familiar with that, which is not my own plug, but I just realized we haven't mentioned them yet. And they're a great resource for research and other family clubs and so forth. So check them out as well. So thanks again. This has been a lot of fun.
So we'll finish up, I guess, closing remarks on me. Lainey, thank you so much for bringing this topic up and really raising awareness about this. It's so important for, you know, the younger children to kind of have these experiences and to slow down on life pushes and expectations and be able to start learning in a natural way that works for them, and to get away from the push of the academics and more on the play and the work. So I really appreciate that you brought this topic to light, and I hope there'll be so much more continued conversation. As Rachel's been doing this for many years now, we're certainly seeing that it's growing. In terms of what I'd say to somebody who's on the edge, right now, think of what your ideal yes zone is. Think of the place outside. Is it a big field? Is it a wooded area? Is it a beach? Where would be right now in your calm moment? Think of what you and your kids' yes zone will be. That way you're prepared for the next time you're having a bad day and nothing seems right. You say, hey, I've got this yes zone. Let's just go try it out and see what happens. And like Rachel said, truly put the effort in. I don't think you'll be disappointed. For the things that I want to plug, it's of course forschoolforall.com with Claudine. I know she talked a lot about leading, but I think one of our big missions is really the for all aspect. You know, there's a lot of different options that you can go from the very most expensive kind of playing in the woods, which is what I think Claudine started in. And she's like, there's got to be an option for people that don't have any money. And so what we're trying to do is provide, the gamut of options for even just free getting together with people, going and playing in the woods. And so those are groups that we offer. Also, when you're having a bad day, you head up my other blog, bleepingmotherhood.com. We have a hilarious book, Would You Rather, available on Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for this amazing conversation tonight. And thank you, Anne. Anne put together this panel, and she had the vision to create a show based on really sharing this knowledge that there's not a lot of conversations out there talking about nature-based education. So thank you for thanking me, but really the real thanks goes to our producer for having the vision to create this beautiful platform for us to have this conversation. And also I want to thank Mel and Biggie over at Conscious Consumer Network. Thank you so much for allowing us to share these conversations through your network and really having that platform as well to get these ideas out into the world. And thank you to everybody else. Oh, and thank you to Poppy, the 11-year-old who lent me her room and who provided this amazing poster for me to do this show this morning or tonight. So finally, wherever you are and whatever you do, continue to always do it for the love of learning.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire, the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.